Go ahead.
Sure. So everybody, this is our third and final pre-IC session, once again with Martha Barlow, who is one of the fabulous Wisconsin affiliate directors. And we are going to go ahead and get started. This one is about developing underlying problem ideas. So
Okay.
another very useful topic.
Thanks to all of you for being with us. So I will go ahead and share my screen so we can get this started. All right. So as Allison mentioned, this presentation is about developing underlying problem ideas while you're preparing for competition. And I'm just going to back up a minute and say, so I am from Wisconsin right now. I'm the co-affiliate director, so kind of the second person in charge. Lynn Buckmaster is our primary, and she took over after I had been the affiliate director for 16 years. So I'm having fun now working with her. And I also coached for many, many years until I retired, so which was a number of years ago now. So we will get going on talking about underlying problems. So after challenges, everything else in the process stems from the underlying problem. So it is really, really important to be on target here. And this is probably a step where, you know, with our student booklets and stuff, we find the most basically the most problems. And so, you know, we've worked on some different things to try and address that. But I'll go through information that hopefully will help you. So don't wait for competition to develop a UT, because you can create many topic related possibilities while you're preparing and while you're researching with the students. And this is important because it's really important to not send your kids into a competition with like, use this, you know, underlying problem, make this one fit. Okay, part of learning the problem solving process for kids to be able to generate what are some important action goals that we can put into our underlying problem. So you'll see on this watch here that it says wearable technology. So the examples I'm going to use to start with here are based on the wearable technology future scene that we used, not this year, was it last year or the year before? But so if you've read that one, but otherwise just to know it's about, you know, various things that you can wear that help in a lot of ways. So it's a great idea to gather and create many KVPs, the middle part of the underlying problem, the key verb phrase. Usually when we're training coaches, we start calling this an action goal. Okay, and we want an important action goal. And so then we'll move on to say important means key. Okay, and an action is a verb phrase. So if we start right out sometimes with KVPs and key verb phrases, it just doesn't sink in. So we do like to start out kind of talking about action goals and then translate that into our official language of key verb phrases or KVPs. So one way to start to gather ideas for action goals or key verb phrases, and to me, this is the starting point. You can get a lot of ideas from the RRR summaries, readings, research, and resources. If you're using those with your students, which everybody should be using those, they're really a good jumping off point. And for juniors, especially if they're, you know, fairly new, sometimes the RRR research stuff can be enough. If kids are experienced and they're older, middle and senior, then, you know, you can start there and go on. But looking through the summaries for wearable technology, these phrases came straight out of some of the summaries. It wasn't even like, you know, read a thing and think about, well, what could a KVP be? It's like, here's the phrase right there. So a few that were in there were safeguard the privacy of users, and we would add wearable users, enhance user supervision of wearable data, reduce overdependence on wearable tech for decision-making, and regulate the data that companies collect from wearables. Now, one thing that Lynn Buckmaster, our primary affiliate director, does for the evaluators is she does go through all those summaries and she pulls out a lot of these possible KVPs that go into our evaluation notes. And so that can be helpful for the evaluators. She doesn't give those to the coaches because, okay, that's kind of like up to the kids to figure that out. But another place you can go to think, okay, are the themes and concepts? And, years ago, there was no themes and concepts. And this is kind of one of my favorite parts that is included in the RRR these days. But trying to come up with action goals or KVPs for each of the different themes and concepts is a good starting point. So one of the concepts for wearable technology was that they're appearing more in everyday life. And just knowing that there's more of them, you could come up with an action goal of how might we enhance the user's experience with wearables. One of the themes was the privacy issues. So you could come up with how might we improve the security of user data gathered by wearables. There was a theme about them wearables being used for entertainment. So one might be, how might we encourage responsible use of entertainment wearables? And there was a section on high-tech fashion. So how might we regulate the wearable fashion industry might be one. And when you read the concepts that are underneath those themes, they could suggest additional how might we's. So as you're researching with kids, because you still have a couple weeks till IC if you're heading there with your students, and you could certainly do a little bit of this. But when you're thinking about working with your students, throughout a whole preparation for, each of the problems, you can take some of these things and use them with your students as far as creating a list and so forth. So another place you can get them is when you read an article that has challenges related to the topic. All right, you can use that challenge, okay, to come up with a KVP. So in one of the readings for wearable technology, it said, the batteries of many wearables do tend to drain quickly. So, this is based on the future seen about it. So some health data may not be collected, okay? And so a possible KVP would be, how might we improve the functioning of wearable devices? And electronic things, batteries are always an issue. You can also look at the solutions that are proposed in the articles that you read with students. And when you read about a solution in an article, the question to ask yourself, or for your kids to ask, is what goal is this solution addressing? So here's an example solution. Insurance companies plan to require that their clients use wearables that provide health data. This data will be accessed by the insurance company. So it's a solution. So that might have come up in an article. So you might ask, so why would they be doing this? Why would they want to require this? What goal is this addressing? So one possible goal is that they want to encourage healthier behavior in the wearable users. And of course, that will improve the insurance company not having to pay out as much for healthcare. From a practice future scene, you can come up with a variety of KVPs. So what the practice future scene here said that students will wear brain sensing headbands with 35 sensors during school hours. They will get an electrical jolt from the headband when their attention decreases. And that seems a little not right. But anyway, a goal could be, how might we protect students' bodies from potentially invasive wearable devices? Now, if you've kind of been paying attention to all of the KVPs we've come up with, you can see that they're across quite a spectrum so far of ideas. Once you've collected, a variety of KVPs or come up with them and kept a list and so forth. Then, oh, here, you can work with I said that too soon, I guess. You can work with challenges to develop KVPs if you have written complete challenges from research material or if you've done them with a practice future scene. So a complete challenge basically has 3 parts: cause, effect, and consequence. It is actually like a cause-effect chain because the effect serves as the cause for the consequence, but we usually use this terminology: cause, effect, consequence. So here's an example. You can look over the causes that you used in your challenges. And is there something going on in one or more of the causes that could be addressed in a KVP? So this example, Xander relies on his implanted chip to manage his colleagues. Thinking about that cause, okay, by itself, which needs to be information that came from the future scene, a possible KVP might be, how might we reduce over-reliance on wearable technology? One thing you can do too is if you've, using that practice future scene and you've brainstormed a variety of challenges and you look at the causes for each one, are there several causes that have a common theme? And if there are, it's like, well, can we kind of bring those together with an action goal that addresses that common theme? You can also look at the effects in your challenges. So he relies on his chip, and so then if he overuses his chip, his team members may feel they lack privacy. So the next step, okay, that intermediate step, the effect in your challenge, could also suggest a keyword phrase. In this case, how might we protect the privacy of wearable tech users? And once again, you can look at, your variety of challenges and say, do we have several challenge effects that are sort of similar? Is there a common issue there? Now, when it comes to the consequence, though, my advice is to be very careful about making your KVP about a consequence. Sometimes this can work, but often it takes you in a direction that is either not related to the topic or it's not a key issue in the future scene. So for example, here, he relies on his chip. If he overuses it, his team members might feel they lack privacy. So as a result, they may stop responding to his directions and requests. Now, if you make your KVP about that, how might we make the team members follow Xander's directions? Or how might we be sure the team members do their jobs? You can see that those ideas don't have a close relationship to wearable technology, nor are they one of the key issues in the future scene. Yes, this might happen, okay, but since this isn't, a possible negative effect, what you want to do is fix either the condition or you want to fix, the cause or the effect. So sometimes I know that kids get taught to pick one challenge and write an underlying problem about that one challenge. And I have never really done that with my kids because there's too much possibility for them to pick a challenge and go right to that consequence and write a KVP about that. And they're not really on target. So those KVPs are getting away from the main issues and don't relate to the topic. So that is why you can use your challenges really well to come up with ideas. You have to be careful when you look at the consequence. So the KVP does need to reflect a concern identified in challenges. Otherwise, why would you have bothered to brainstorm them? And this is, I guess, what I was talking about already. It could be based on one of the challenges that identifies a major issue on its own, but be careful that one challenge, and especially kind of avoiding just the consequence, can lead to a narrow or unrelated KVP. Because of course, yes, kids do write challenges that aren't that closely related to the future scene. Your KVP could stem from several challenges, and that's a stronger way to go if you can say, are there several causes or several effects that are similar? that could be a good area to consider. Sometimes you can call this an umbrella issue. Okay, so this issue comes up or in these related under challenges, whether it's in the condition phrase or in the effect phrase. So another thing to practice, especially if you have a practice future scene, or you can look back at the future scene students just worked with, let's say at the state bowl. Often each of the paragraphs that follow the introductory paragraph suggests one or more major issues. So one way to practice this is for each team member to take a paragraph, read it closely, and then explain the major issue in their paragraph to the team. And you could have them write a key verb phrase about that major issue. And this is a good chance also to look at the charge in the final paragraph. So when we talk about these major issues from each paragraph, which of them are most closely related to the charge? And that's a good step, especially when you're going to be heading right into competition, for kids to know how to do that. So I think I started to talk about this before that last piece, but after you've gathered a lot of KVPs, you've created a list, it's good to keep an ongoing list as you go. One thing you can do is to sort and categorize them and group similar ideas together. So if you're working, then it's helpful to take a group. So maybe this group is all about privacy issues. We've got a variety of KVPs, but they're sort of focused on different aspects of privacy, or they're focused on different aspects of how the wearable technology functions and so forth. So you're narrowing it down and not just looking at our whole list, but we've grouped them together for ones that are somewhat related to each other, and let's look at that group. And then what you can ask is, okay, we're going to talk about purposes. Okay, so the purpose answers why we want to accomplish that action goal in the KVP. And purposes, you can ask yourself, can we mix and match them? So if you take a couple of those related KVPs, come up with some purposes for them. Okay, and notice I haven't talked about the condition phrase yet, because in Wisconsin, at least, we advise, and we know the kids don't always do this and the coaches don't always teach it, but we really advise that kids should be thinking about their action goal, their key verb phrase first, and come up with that first, and then put on the purpose, and then go back to the condition phrase. So that's why I'm talking about purposes second. If you write some purposes to a group of key verb phrases, like I said, they need to answer why we want to accomplish a KVP. So that's a good question to ask. Look at a KVP. Why would we do this? And then look at the variety of purposes you'd come up with. Can we mix and match those? You know, can this one go with that? Oh, can this one go with that one? Another thing to look at with the purposes, are they specific or overly broad? Now, we see a lot of overly broad purposes. And, you know, we've tried to send out information about that, but examples would be so that the citizens can lead a healthy life. Okay, well, that is pretty broad, even if you're dealing with a, you know, a health kind of topic, but still. Or, you know, so the people in the future scene can be happy in the future. Those kind of things are so broad that they don't really give you an idea about why you might do the thing. On the other hand, if they're too specific, sometimes the purpose actually introduces almost another action goal that needs to be addressed. And that can be problematic because, you know, and then you really have two important things going on. It should be that the purpose, if you accomplish the key verb phrase, it should just flow. The purpose should flow out of accomplishing that. And so that's when here, the purpose should be a logical outcome of accomplishing the KVP and not like another goal. And that can be tricky to figure out, you know, to really notice. Then add condition phrases, and they could come from multiple sources when you're practicing these. You could find information from your research or the practice feature scene to use for conditions, but it should be accurate information, okay? And then think about, how does that information support the goal? If this is going on, is that a good rationale? Okay, is that a good starting point for, yeah, that's going on, so then if we could accomplish this, okay, it could make those things better. Also, another question now is did we avoid writing complete challenges in the condition phrase? I don't know if you run into this or if you really mark this down, but we've begun marking this down in the challenges, because we sometimes find that students have taken like a whole challenge, put the whole thing as their condition phrase, since this is going on in the future scene, this could happen, and as a result, this could blah, blah, blah. And then they write an action goal. Okay, but that's like too much. We just want to know what was going on in the future scene that led you to this action goal. So we don't want to see like a whole complete challenge in there. And just like with the purposes, once we do come up with some of these conditions, can we mix and match them? So this is really all practice to get into kids' heads a lot of different ideas, okay, for the underlying problems that they can then draw on in the competition. So they can think, well, maybe you've dealt a lot with that whole issue of privacy with the wearable technology, and that's kind of a major issue in the future scene. So they can draw on the work that you did, okay, for that subtopic to help them to come up with their underlying problem. Another thing to work on with kids, and this is maybe a little bit more advanced, okay, but is once, look, you can practice this with the KVPs that you've collected, and especially looking at groups of them. But kids can learn to quick do this in competition too, is to look at the underlying problems and consider the 4 I's. First, is it something we want to work on solving? Now, one of my students, high school student, she'd been doing future problem solving, global issues problem solving for a long time. And one time they finished a problem and she came out and she just said, "Oh, Mrs. Barlow, when we're in there, it just feels like we really need to fix this situation and we really need to do something." So basically, they were finding things that, yeah, we want to solve this because we really feel like we need to help them out. The other I is impact. If we accomplish this, what's going to be better in the future scene? If you go back to that example where using the consequence was like, how might we help make sure people do their jobs? And you ask, well, how is that going to help the future scene? There really wasn't anything in that future scene where people weren't doing their jobs. It was a potential consequence, okay? But if that's what you wrote your underlying problem about, the impact on the future scene is not going to be very big. So asking, what's the impact? If we do this, is it going to really help make the future scene better? Or anything in the topic area that we've been researching. Next is influence. Does this underlying problem, does it have a good relationship to the topic? Not just the future scene, but to the topic. And another one is imagination. Can we be creative and move past the present? Now, sometimes that's hard, okay? But, if you've done any work on future thinking and stuff with your kids, that's a little bit easier for them. But another question, probably the biggest two is it something we can work on solving, and will it make the future scene better? And the other one is the big E. Do we actually have the expertise to come up with a lot of ideas for this underlying problem? Sometimes in technology-oriented future scenes, the kids come up with something that needs them to, do a lot of technological things that they don't really have the expertise for. And so if you ask yourself this, can we do this? Can we actually come up with a lot of ideas here, and just a quick check is like, hey, can each of you in your head right now think of at least 2 or 3 solutions? Okay, because if you can't, then maybe this is too technical for us to tackle and we need to take a little bit different tack. So the other thing I'm going to share with you is some quizzes that we put together a couple years ago, because we were seeing so many underlying problems with our underlying problems. And so I'm going to share all these quizzes and things with you that you could use or modify or use in any way that you want. And the quizzes focus on these kind of things. So there's 3 quizzes for these 3 ideas: that the key verb phrase, which we think should be written first, it should be about important issues in the future scene. It should be understandable all by itself. So I'm big on that. Maybe not everyone is, but I want to read a key verb phrase that I could pull it out and I could still make sense of it in relationship to the future scene. A lot of kids, they put all this stuff in their condition phrase, and then they'll put in something that's so general, like, so we can monitor them. Okay, but if you pull that out, so we can monitor what? Okay, for me, I like to see enough information in the key verb phrase that I could understand it all by itself without needing the other parts. And of course, we all know it has to be one verb phrase with a single concept. So I'll show you in a minute the quizzes we have on that. So for each of these, I'm going to, in the materials that Allison will share, in fact, they'll be posted, I guess, in the next Wednesday newsletter that we get. There are links to each of the Google quizzes and for each of those things. And so you can see that at the end of the link, it says copy. And so if you click on the link, it will open up and ask if you want to make a copy of it. So you won't be dealing with the original at all. And you can make a copy and then you can change it, use it however you want. So with purposes, the 3 quizzes are about these concepts. The purpose should be specific rather than overly broad or vague. It should be one verb phrase with a single concept, and it should be a logical result of accomplishing the KVP. I will say that we get frustrated with some teams because every time the same team comes and they have like a triple KVP and a triple purpose. So making sure these things are single verb phrases important. And so there are 3 quizzes about those concepts. And then condition phrases. It has to be accurate information or summary of the future scene facts or research. It should not be written as a challenge. You might not use that one if that's not a concern of yours, but it's a concern that we have. And then it has to have a logical connection to the key verb phrase. And then there's 3 quizzes for that. And finally, there is a quiz for analyzing a whole underlying problem, with all the parts in it. So each of the 2 quizzes there has 3 underlying problems to analyze. So I'm going to jump out of this and I'm going to show you some of the quiz things. So in the materials will be this, okay, and this is just what we're looking for. Key verb phrases should do this, must be this, purposes and all of that, and the parameters. And then this is like, I'm looking at the key verb phrase ones now. I'll show you kind of what they look like. The document that you would get looks like this, and this has all the information for key verb phrases. So right here is where you would click, okay. I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but you would click, then you'd get the option to copy the quiz if you want to use that one, and for each of these. Now, one way you could use these is you could look at your students' like recent past work and think, are there anything here in the underlying problem that it seems like my students are having trouble with? Are they having trouble with getting, a good key verb phrase, or are they having trouble with the purposes or the condition phrases, or, that sort of thing? And then you could just pick out, what you'd like to work on. So what else it shows you here is that the first quiz is about key verb phrases should be about important issues in the future scene. And so these are the ones in red here are in the quiz. So these are important issues in the future scene. And by the way, this future scene was about environmental. Oh, what was the environmental topic? Can't think of it right off the top of my head, but a recent thing on environmental issues. So these are in the quiz. These are questions 1, 6, and 7. And these ones, the right answer is they're not as important. And then these are not supported in the future scene. How might we prevent trees from burning and creating smoke? There just wasn't anything about that in the future scene. Now, they might have had a challenge that said, this could result in trees burning and creating smoke, but it wasn't in the future scene. So it's not really a good focus for the key verb phrase. The ones in black, and these examples, I should say, all came from our students' work on this topic, on this, all their booklets, and all of these were pulled out. So we didn't write these. This is what the kids wrote. And so we pulled that out. And so for each of the activities, it shows you what the answers are, which ones are, pretty clear what it means, not clear what it means. So here's understandable by itself. You can kind of see what I mean. The first one here, how might we positively change the farming infrastructure? I could pull that out and that would make sense to me once I've read the future scene. But some of these are, how might we help the farmers? Okay, that's so broad just as a KVP by itself that, or how might we fix this problem? By itself, that is very, very broad. And then the third one on key verb phrases is focused on making sure it's one verb phrase with a single concept. So here is what those quizzes would look like once you get into Google. A spot for their first and last name, because if I'm kind of assuming you all are familiar with Google and how to use it. And if not, you can certainly take all this information and transfer it into something else that you are using. Once COVID hit and all the kids were doing virtual work, we learned, Lynn and I, who did most of our things in Word and PDFs and all of that, that all of our school districts in Wisconsin pretty much are using Google Docs, all the different aspects of Google Docs. And we didn't know very much about that. So it was a big learning curve for us. Okay. But we've kind of got a little bit proficient now, because everything that we did then we had to have in Google Docs so that the teachers could use it virtually with their kids. So this gives them the concept. Key verb phrases should be about important issues in the future scene. So for each of these statements, is it important? Is it in the future scene, but not as important? Or if it's not really about the future scene? Okay, and they would go through and answer each of those things. And then you would be able to see how your students did. Now, you might actually disagree with a few of the answers on all of this material, because I would work on this and send it to Lynn, and she would say, well, I answered this one differently. So we'd try and fix it. So we agreed. But human environmental impact. There you go. That was the topic. So that would be one of the quizzes. Here would be the second one on understandable by itself. Okay, is it pretty clear what it means? Or if it's not really clear, all by itself. And then, okay, the third one here has to be a single verb phrase, one verb phrase with a single concept. And so you're just asking, these are the answers. One verb, but two concepts after that, two complete verb phrases, two complete phrases joined by while, or two concepts, but it's okay because they're being compared with words like balance or equalize. So for each one, they say which is it. And that gives you some good talking points with the kids. So as I mentioned, okay, there are quizzes for each of the concepts on this tips for writing underlined problems. So you would not just jump in and do all of these with the kids, but especially if you're preparing for IC, you might look at their past work and think, it seems like, my students are sometimes writing a double key verb phrase or a double purpose. So maybe we should work on that. And you would be welcome to just use these. Of course, once you've copied it, you can change use a different feature scene and change all of these things. It's a lot of work, okay, to think of them if you don't have student booklets to pull them all out of, because that's what we did. But the only thing I would say is if you're going to change and use different topic or whatever, I would look at the answer key and say, well, if number one, the first thing was the answer, if you keep your changed thing to the same answer, then you don't have to go into the quiz and change what all the answers are. So just some thoughts there. So as I said, a PDF of the PowerPoint that I was using and all of this other stuff will be in the materials that you'll have access to. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if anyone has any questions. Anyone? You're all muted, so if anyone does have a question, unmute yourself. I mean, I'm happy to take questions or whatever. No questions. Been pretty quiet people today. Okay.
The presentation covers everything.
Well, yeah, this is Diana. That's what I was going to say. I am so impressed by this. I have been taking notes furiously because I didn't realize we were going to get a PDF of all your information. I saw your first one. Unfortunately, 6 a.m. didn't cut it for me this morning.
Yeah.
So I will be anxiously looking for the recording for the second one. But are there PDFs available for each one of your presentations?
Yes.
And
Okay.
if so, how do I get the ones
So included in each Wednesday IC newsletter?
Yeah.
Pre-IC newsletter. I think we're coming up on 2 weeks, maybe 3. I'm not sure.
It's
Numerically,
2 weeks.
I don't know. Yeah, 2 weeks. Okay, good.
There's been 3 presentations now. So maybe in this newsletter this week, maybe you can mention to April that to put in all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be great, because I didn't see any reference to getting the PDF for the first one.
Well, what it is there's a link. There is a link to the video.
Right.
And then there's a link to just a general link to the materials.
Oh,
and,
okay. I saw the link to the video.
And the materials will include the PDF. And for example, the materials for this one will have all of these other things that I
So in the newsletter that I received that had the link to the video for the first one, there's a link in that newsletter to the materials too?
No.
I didn't think there was.
Correct. There was not one. So we're waiting until all 3 of them are done because we can only upload so many files per newsletter that we send out.
Okay.
So we will also at some point create a composite that has all of the links, and it will just be that as a message. So it will only have the pre-IC sessions with the link to the video and then the link to the materials.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. That
of course.
clarifies
Diana, I apologize. I have been trying to say at the beginning that you'll get a PDF so you don't have to copy everything down.
Well, and maybe I don't know.
I think
because
I
wasn't joining you until I got the recording, and I didn't pick up on that. So, but I'm thrilled is all I can say.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments that they would like to make?
Yeah, thank you so very, very much. You really pulled it all together. I heard your presentation a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully these have been helpful to you. And the thing is, you cannot like all of a sudden like be doing all of this stuff in the 2 weeks before, I see now, but assuming that you'll be continue working with your students or other students, in next year and in the future years, that you can, go back and think about how to introduce some of the things sort of more gradually as you work with your students.
Yeah, that actually was my objective in all of this, because I want to get better at working with my students next year than
Right.
I was this year. So it's very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Well, good. I hope that's the case. So, okay. Well, thank all of you for joining us, and I will be sending those links and things to Allison, so she'll be able to share those as soon as they can, I guess. So,
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
okay. Thanks.
Bye.